Alright folks, as promised, here's part 2 about double axes. Now, the previous video is linked in the description below. If you haven't watched it yet, do it. Do it now. Two things to keep in mind before we start. First, this is sort of a compilation of double axes, or a cherry-picked catalog, however you want to look at it. Don't let that skew your idea of how common they were. If for every axe with spike or a hammer, there are, say, hundreds of simple axes without, then for every double axe, there are probably thousands of spike or hammer axes. Don't quote me on that, it's just a vague estimate. Either way, spike and hammer axes are way more common. And second, apologies for only scratching the surface. I want to give you as broad of an impression as possible from different time periods and different areas, so I can't go into great depth for each one. Also, I've been dealing with a lot of time pressure lately, so that has put a limit on how deeply I was able to dig. If you were looking into this for weeks or months or years, I'm pretty sure you would find a lot more. Anyway, so let's go get into it. Generally in real-world history, double-headed axes are remarkably rare, especially ones intended for actual use. But the further back in time we go, the more we find. The Neolithic, Younger Stone Age, and Chacolithic, Copper Age, have quite a variety of two-sided stone axes to offer. You know, this one and that one right here would look quite iconic if they were made of steel. And we even have one made of copper down there. So you have a variety of different shapes. You have very simple ones, you know, right here. You've got more elaborate ones, you have symmetrical, less than symmetrical, things like that. We have what's called the battle axe culture in parts of Scandinavia. They made boat-shaped double axes. So, ironically, while Vikings with steel double axes are pure fantasy, earlier Scandinavians, you can't really call them that, but people in the region that we now call Scandinavia had double axes, albeit made of stone. Interesting how that goes. The battle axe culture was part of the greater corded ware culture, roughly 4,400 to 5,000 years ago. Again, Chacolithic. And some have an edge plus hammer or two fully blunt ends, and some are double-edged. So you have plenty of diversity. As far as weight is concerned, you might actually want a double-ended design for extra mass, and it seems that worked out quite well. I decided to blur out the picture here. Arguably, any pictures used for a video like this fall under fair use, but the British Museum has a specific copyright license policy, so to respect that, I blurred it out, and it's going to be linked down below, so you can still take a look at it. So this double axe here weighs 451 grams, or a pound. And they also have a hammer axe with a very similar weight. I'm pointing in the wrong direction. Very similar weight, right there. I should be pointing with this. Point with a pointy bit. That makes sense. Here's a beautiful example from Sweden. Interesting to note, the hole for hafting it is not centered. You would expect it here, but it's actually off-center. That seems a little bit odd. It actually makes it appear like a variation of a hammer axe in that sense. In case of a hammer axe, it makes sense to put it off-center. For balance reasons, because you're removing more material here, obviously. You're polishing the axe more there because you want to taper it to actually get an edge, whereas the hammer side has more mass. So in order to balance it more or less evenly, you just put it here instead of right in the center. In practical terms, it seems like a bit of an odd choice to make a double-ended stone axe, because sharpness isn't as much of a concern. If we think about steel double axes, double-bitted woodsman's axes, for example, where you want a backup edge, that is, or another edge that is sharper than the other for different purposes. It's a bit hard to say on the picture, but it could be that this is actually thicker. It kind of looks like this end is thicker than that, which would then give this some meaning. If you actually have more mass there, then the asymmetrical placement makes sense. And so if this is steeper, then it is a different tool. So you have this for finer cutting, and you have this for, more heavy-duty chopping. That's what it looks like. I don't know if for sure if that's true, but that's what it looks like to me. And of course, a hammer adds a different tool, like I talked about in part 1. This one here is from Denmark. It's an interesting shape. This looks almost like a transitional piece, because from the side, it actually looks quite a bit like a rounded off double axe. But then you see in this picture here that this is indeed a hammer and this is an axe blade, albeit a rather blunt one. As far as usage is concerned, my guess is that there wasn't necessarily a strong distinction between tool and weapon at that time. We have skeletal evidence of injuries from stone axes, hammers, and adzes in sort of a raid context, and it would make sense that you would just use the same thing. You would just have your tool on you that you use for a variety of different tasks, and then if you have to fight with it, you do. Here's a copper axe from Iran, circa 5,500 years old. It's interesting because if you showed me this picture without knowing and told me that this is an iron axe from the Middle Ages, I would believe it. It looks like it. And in fact, with picture research, it's often, there's a lot of margin for error, because quite often you find a picture that's mislabeled and there's no other information, and you try to find it and there's no other source. So yeah, some of these could be mislabeled and misdated. If they are, I apologize. I try to source check them as much as possible, but in some cases it's just all I found was this one picture with minimal or even no information, and I couldn't verify it. So keep that in mind. Anyway, enough with the damn disclaimers already, right? All right, let's talk about the iconic Minoan double axe, aka labris. What was its purpose? Well, many people don't know that Minoan women walked around topless and dual-wielded axes to protect themselves from hordes of horny dudes. You learn something new each day, huh? I'm kidding, of course, in case you weren't able to figure that out. One main function is as a symbolic object used in religious ceremonies. You can see them right here. These axes have been interpreted as votive offerings to the goddess of war. That's one of the translations suggested for this inscription right here. It can be translated as mother of war. Depending on how you translate it, another possible interpretation is the equivalent of Demeter, the Greek goddess of agriculture and fertility. Either way, here's a beautiful piece at the Athens War Museum. It looks functional. It's obviously haftable, and you can even see an edge grind. There's only one problem. It's made of brass, which is suboptimal compared to bronze. Some of them have the stylized extra set of horns. If you want to look at it that way, you could sort of interpret this as a quadruple axe if you want. Some of these are gargantuan. You can't really get a good feel for the size in this particular picture, but imagine this is about 1.5 meters wide. That's what it looks like. So they're huge and very thin, and yeah, obviously don't even start with, could this have been made for a giant? No, just cut it out, stop it. Same with this here, it's made of gold. So not exactly a functional weapon, decorated and everything. This is just purely ceremonial. It doesn't get any clearer than that. However, there are also much more functional looking ones. This gives you an idea of the enormous variation. Let me just scoot out of the way here a little bit. So you've got all kinds of shapes. So here are the giant ones. Then you have, some of them look really quite functional. The problem with Minoan axes is that you have the ceremonial ones, but they also used double-sided tool axes. So it can be difficult to distinguish. In some cases, it's pretty clear because of how thin they are or otherwise construction. But there are plenty here that look perfectly functional. You could probably have them and use them. Again, all kinds of different sizes. It's quite fascinating, really. And here is a very simple, functional-looking double axe with a crested helmet engraved on it. Is that a hint that it was a battle axe? It's hard to say. Again, if they were designed as votive offerings, in honor of the goddess of war, then this could just signify that, or it could have belonged to a warrior. Most often, especially before the Middle Ages, it's hard, if not impossible, to really conclusively prove that something was a battle axe, unless it has very distinctive combat design features, if you will. I've found an interesting doctoral thesis on the practical use of Minoan axes, though. Various signs of wear were found, which are consistent with tool use or woodworking and meat processing and masonry as well. So the Minoans definitely did have double axes that served as tools as well as the ceremonial ones. Here's another reminder of how fantasy-like historical weapons can seem at times. This is from early Bronze Age Luristan, which is Western Iran. So you've got axes with multiple spikes. They had them in different variations. Sometimes the spikes are very distinct, individual ones spread out. Sometimes they are much closer together. In some cases, they are partially fused together. Some of them are rounded off. This one here is between 3,000 and 3,300 years old, by the way. Here's a double axe, but not in the way we expect. One of the blades is rotated to form an adze. So this is an axe-adze hybrid, which makes a lot of sense as a tool because an adze has very different applications. If you want to carve a concave shape, like if you're making a boat or if you want to carve a bowl, things like that, this is very useful. This is also a different type of double axe, not symmetrical, but you have a different shape for the second blade. Again, the different angle increases versatility. A little further east, we've got a Bactrian copper axe. The blade, on the other hand, is remarkably strongly tilted downward, so that's quite interesting. General asymmetrical axes are more common, much more common than symmetrical ones, who apparently carried double-edged axes to battle. This also corresponds with a fairly strong case for functional double-ended battle axes in the same general area, the Scythians and Sarmatians. You can see the area right there, and this Scythian warrior has a symmetrical double axe. The Sarmatians seem to have inspired Greek tales of Amazons, and you can see here this mosaic depicts Amazons wielding double axes. There's one here, you've got two there, there's a third one here, and another one right there. The Scythian battle axe is called sagaris or sagarios in Greek, as shown on an Attic amphora here. See that right there with a spike at the end? Similar to this. I'm pointing with exactly the right thing. This amphora is 2,520 or 2,530 years old. The spike is quite common on these. On that one, it's particularly long. And many also have a hammer. You see right here is a fairly small hammer at the end. And this would fit right into the Viking Age, wouldn't it? In terms of looks. Interesting how similar things that are so far apart in time can look sometimes. And here's a very interesting form. It looks like a straight, narrow axe blade on the left side, unless it used to have a point similar to the other side that broke off. That could be. And the other side is almost sickle-like, but could also be interpreted as a war pick. It could have been a double-sided war pick, possibly. Depending on how you want to look at it, you could interpret it as a double axe as well. This one I found listed separately on different pages as Scythian and Byzantine. No date given, unfortunately. Upon further digging, it popped up in a Russian forum labeled as Crimean, presumably between the 13th and 16th century. A bit of a time period in between there. And interestingly, the Crimean Peninsula actually falls within the Sarmatian cultural area. Scythians and Sarmatians were often mixed up or blended together. Either way, this one is supposedly a later time period, but interesting to note that the southernmost tip of the Crimean Peninsula was also under Byzantine control. So you see, this entire area, they had a thing for double axes, and it carries over through different time periods, apparently. Here's another Crimean axe, also from the Middle Ages, and it's got the asymmetrical shape as well. A lot of them do. Quite often they are bearded, but the one is at a slightly different angle than the other and is narrower. I wonder if they also have different edges. You can't really tell in the picture, but I wouldn't be surprised if this one was possibly thicker and had like a sturdier grind, and this one sharper. If anybody knows, by the way, if you happen to have seen this one in real life, let us know. There are quite a few other Crimean ones shown on that forum. It's very interesting. Again, link down below. Keep in mind this is auto-translate from Russian, so it could be terrible. I don't know. Either way, this is definitely a functional looking one, and this could be used as a battle axe, but it could also be a tool. Again, it can be difficult to say. I found another Russian website on this topic, also possibly mangled by auto-translate, but they've got some axes from the Alani or Alans. Alan! Get out of here, you ancient meme! The Alans were culturally very similar to the Scythians and Sarmatians, by the way. So there's some really interesting finds here. Again, I don't know their sources. Whenever you look at things like that, you never know for sure if something is authentic, but if they are, those are great examples. Some of them have hammers, again, on the end. In fact, a lot of them. But you can see some of these in between. You've got some with that have two blades, mostly asymmetrical. There's some more with spikes. I think the third one here from the top in the left picture, I think that's a blade as well. It's sometimes hard to see if you only see them from the side. Back to the Byzantines, you've got some depictions of double axes, even symmetrical ones. I've got this one right here next to my head and that over there. The asymmetrical type is apparently known as Cycurion, and you've got, again, the same idea as before. Just like what I talked about in part one, it seems to make more sense to have a differently shaped blade, so you've got something that fulfills a slightly different function. And this is, oddly enough, a picture from a Korean tweet, and auto-translate suggests that it's from the migration era, I think. I'm not sure of this one. I wanted to show it, but I really couldn't verify exactly what and where and how. This is supposedly found in Bavaria and assumed to be likely Hungarian. Again, I can't confirm that. This is a very interesting picture, unfortunately with no info other than that these axe heads are from Bulgaria between the 10th and 16th century. You couldn't be much more vague. Like, oh, it could be early Middle Ages, could be Renaissance, I don't know. Either way, if they're authentic, then there you go. There you've got your medieval double axe. So how about we move on to medieval imagery? This right here is a depiction of Carolingian warriors from 820 to 830. And this guy right here clearly has a double axe. Oh no, my axe is getting cut off partially. We've got that, and then we've got this from France. 890, this dude up here is holding a double axe. Then also France, this is from the 12th century. So he's happily swinging a double axe right there. Should probably comment a little bit on depictions like this in general. You can take them as definitive proof because people drew some wacky stuff sometimes. So just because they drew it doesn't absolutely mean that it existed, but I'm inclined to think that there's something to it because this is a battle scene which doesn't have any other mythological or crazy elements. And you do have a number of depictions from different parts. This is from England, 1180 to 1190. Actually shows two axes. Sorry, the resolution is not great on this. So you've got one here. Hopefully you can just about see it. If you're on your phone, forget about it. You can't see it. Sorry about that. But the other guy, no, I can't even see it myself. Yeah, here. The other guy also seems to have a short, small double axe wielding in one hand. This one's from Italy. These two right here, let me just reposition that a little bit. These look like double axes, especially that one there, but pickaxes seem more likely. This is from 1325 to 1350, by the way. Since they're breaching, apparently, they're creating an opening in a stone wall here, I would think it's probably pickaxes rather than edged axes, but either way, interesting. Be careful when looking at pictures like this, by the way. This here has been mislabeled as a double axe, but it's actually a hammer pole. This painting makes it more obvious. You can see the surface of the hammer there. You can't really tell when it's depicted from the side. In fact, even in photos, you can't always tell. This one here, I'm assuming is a hammer pole. Could be interpreted as a blade, but it's most likely a hammer. Again, keep in mind the vast majority of historical images show either one-sided axes or a spike or hammer on the other end. Now here's something fun, a French halberd from 1712. So in addition to this large main double-edged thrusting blade, you've also got not one, but two axe blades. Most halberds, again, are asymmetrical. Typically, they have a spike on the other end or a smaller blade or things like that. Here's an earlier one. And this right here is the most bizarre form I could find. Butterfly halberd or whatever you want to call it. That's different. Very fanciful shape here. I would have 100% labeled this fantasy. This is something else. I kind of like it though. It's reminiscent of the Chinese Feng Tian Ji, and this is a weapon that I've been wondering about for a while. So I asked KK Chen, who kindly helped out by checking several books on Chinese arms. Thank you, really appreciate it. So what he found was that after the Han Dynasty, the Ji became ceremonial. The last form used in actual battle is this right here, the dagger Ji. And then that's where it starts to become ceremonial. And as it was pointed out on another website, this doesn't mean that they wouldn't work. It just means that they changed function. And they were regulated by rank. The more of these someone had displayed on a rack, the higher their social status, apparently. Speaking of ceremonial, there's the issue of Indo-Persian double axes. Many of them are labeled ceremonial. This one's called battle axe. I don't know if that's accurate. From the 18th century. From what I've heard from the mid-19th century onward, they're all ceremonial. So earlier ones may be intended for battle. Some of them, it's hard to say. This one looks functional enough. I could imagine that being used. This one also looks reasonably functional. The metal haft is perfectly usable. Generally, you make it hollow. There are a number of medieval battle axes that are made with hollow steel haft. There are also more obvious cases, like this one here, which, as far as I can tell, doesn't even seem to have an edge grind. If you look at that. And heavily decorated. I would guess that this is probably ceremonial and not an actual combat weapon. Then we've got a really fascinating one. This is an all-steel axe with hollow haft containing a dagger. There's actually an error with the weight, with the metric measurement. This seems plausible, 2 pounds, 9.6 ounces, but that is definitely not 41.6 grams. And the stiletto alone weighs 218. So, yeah, it has to be more. But this is very interesting. I quite like this as a design. I would expect this was probably intended for use as a weapon. I mean, it's quite short, but for one-handed use, that's fine. The blade grind looks very functional. This is probably quite sharp. And, of course, also the dagger makes sense for self-defense use. So this is a fantastic example, actually. If you want a historically inspired, practical double axe with hidden, rogue-like dagger shenanigans, there you go. Then there are Sudanese axes. These were used in an uprising against British and Egyptian rulers in the mid to late 19th century. So apparently intended as actual weapons. And yeah, again, I can definitely imagine these to be functional. I don't see any problem with this. As long as you shape it right, as long as you make them properly and haft them in a sturdy enough way and use good materials, there's really no reason why this shouldn't work. There are also examples that look more decorative, like this one here. I don't think that's functional, particularly if you look at the axe blade right here. It seems like a wall hanger. Could be wrong, but that's what I'm guessing. This one is also from the Sudan, and my guess would be, again, probably functional. Looks reasonable. And then for last, I saved an interesting conundrum. Does this count? This is a Chinese battle axe from the Warring States period. This is sort of an omni-axe. It's a single head, but it's got an edge on both sides. So it's a double-edged axe, but it's not a two-headed axe. Pretty neat. I would really like to try out a design like this to see how practical it is. I can imagine it will probably work pretty well. Right, not quite last. I just noticed that I almost forgot something. Here's a Spanish war axe made of iron, supposedly from a museum. I say supposedly because these auctions can be tricky. Like, you never 100% know. There are a lot of dubious sellers on eBay in particular that list all kinds of weird things, fakes and mislabeled stuff and this and that and the other. So who knows, right? And another thing I almost forgot, some Native American axes. Here's a great example from around 900. So this is a true double axe, just made of stone. There's one interesting piece I found where I have no idea about the authenticity. Again, auction. If this is authentic, then definitely counts. Again, take that with a grain of salt. All right, that was a lot of stuff. Hopefully you find it helpful. Maybe that puts things into perspective a little more. So double axes did exist in history here and there. Rarely, for the most part, outside of this one area in the Near East or Middle East, they were apparently quite fond of double axes, and as said, Neolithic and Chacolithic, also quite a number of examples, otherwise rather exceptional. So overall, it seems that people in history agreed with the idea that it's more useful to have a different tool to add, be it a hammer or a spike or a differently shaped blade. So you've got something else to work with that doesn't, act the exact same way as the main blade. Even if you just put different edge grinds on, it's just more versatile. Oh boy, I really don't want to know how much time I just spent setting everything up to perfection. Including sweat is a little bit annoying when it reflects light. This is probably not even going to be enough. Technically, I would need powder, but I don't have no frickin' powder. So, yeah, this is going to have to do. Professional shit. It's quite possible that I've made mistakes, or that some of the pictures that I've found, blah, blah, way too much blah blah. Brief. Brevity. Wait. Are you kidding me? The reflection of the damn chair. Yeah, that's fantastic. There's much I can do about that. Can't be kidding. Oh my goodness. Why? So the chair is gonna have to be in a very specific position. What a bunch of bullshit. Damn it. Damn it, 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 damn it. Yeah, okay. Has this been flickering the entire damn time? Great, now I notice that the stupid reflections of the microphone make things flicker. Ugh, I should crank it down, not up. I'm an idiot. This takes care of the stupid reflection too. Okay, fine. All right. Oh, it's all good. It's all good. I'm not annoyed. I don't have blood pressure issues. I don't have anger issues. No, it's all good. I love redoing the same thing over and over again. I also love working overtime. It's good. It's all fantastic. Love it. It's 6:50 p.m. now. I'm probably going to be at it for another 2 hours, and then I'm going to have to edit, and oh well. Sanity not included. It has a limit. Why does it have a limit to how many pictures it can take? The slideshow function is dumb. It doesn't work the way it's supposed to. This is gonna drive me insane. Before the end of the day, I'm gonna be nuts. Are you telling me this shit has been flickering the entire time? No, you can't tell me that. You can't tell me that. That's bullshit. Fuck you. Nope. I refuse to believe that. I refuse to believe that this flicker has been there the entire time. No. Thanks for watching, and have a good one, folks.